What's up everybody, we back at it again with another Magnum Quest video, and in this one it's going to be all about maximizing your guild potential in the Puppet Wars. Currently there is an ongoing bug right now with Oshishi. She's one-shotting your team, she's capping your damage, she's reviving, she's doing all kinds of sorcery right now. The devs are aware of this and hopefully they get it fixed soon, maybe adding in another day for the event, but we're going to see how that goes. I've said this before, this event is one of the best in terms of potential dragon shards when it's actually working. Obviously the better your guild ranks, the more bosses you defeat, the better the rewards. But regardless, shards, gold dice, guild currency, they're all up for grabs. So I'm going to be giving you 5 tips to help you get prepared. Let's get it. This is going to be a more detailed video with examples that I'm going to be showing rather than just be more general like I did with the one back in September. I just wanted to wait in case there was any differences between the two, even though in the announcement it did sound like the bosses were going to be the same. Also like the same kind of like unique aura, I guess you could call it. So I can confirm it's the same thing, and now we can get into it. At the start, your guild is going to be placed in a bracket that you're going to be battling for the top rankings. One thing to note here is you can only attack a total of 3 times per day if you have cleared up to 1440, which means chapter 14, stage 40. So kicking this off with the first tip, it's going to be understanding each boss. Just remember the top supports to be using alongside your DPS heroes would be Harry, Cinia, and Amirrr. For best results, you definitely want, if possible, Harry in each attack. You're going to start off with 4 bosses. Each boss defeated gives all of your guild members rewards in the mail. Then once all of the 4 bosses are defeated, the 5th boss, which is Fafnir, becomes available. Once this boss is defeated, you move up in a level. The bosses reset, they have bigger HP and better rewards. It does look like they have increased the HP of the bosses compared to the last one in September. So each boss does have a unique aura, that's what I'm just going to go with, and faction advantage and disadvantage buffs play a role in this. So let's look at the first boss, Bill. Bill is a fortress hero, so that means shadow heroes will have a faction advantage buff, meaning 25%. You'll want to utilize these heroes, but avoid using wild DPS heroes because they will have a disadvantage. The unique aura is that he has high physical resistance, meaning you're going to want to use intelligence heroes to maximize your damage. Heroes from the Shadow faction that you're going to want to be using here is Durla and Gus. Gus needs high investment, otherwise there's going to be better options with a neutral buff. Both are going to be intelligence DPS. Heroes from the Fortress, which is going to be neutral, not having an advantage or a disadvantage, would be like Wyndon, Ekra, and then of course you can use the divinity hero Sir. Now we're going to move over to the second boss. The second boss is going to be Naomi. Naomi is a wild hero, so that means fortress heroes will have a faction advantage buff, while you're going to want to avoid using forest DPS heroes. The unique aura that she brings to the table is she's going to have high magical resistance, meaning of course you're going to want to use physical heroes to maximize your damage. Heroes from the fortress faction that you're going to want to be using here are Fang and Auric, but like Gus, you're going to need high investment here with Auric, otherwise there are better options with a neutral buff. Heroes with a neutral buff would be like Ares, Hista, Gila, Manton, Vieira, but keep in mind here not to utilize too many wild heroes if you plan to use an attack on Oshishi, which is the next boss, and I'm going to get into why. So the third boss is Oshishi. Oshishi is a forest hero, so that means wild heroes will have a faction advantage buff, while you're going to want to avoid using shadow DPS heroes. The unique aura is that she's going to summon a tidal barrier, and all heroes outside this barrier, meaning ranged, will have their DPS reduced, so melee heroes is recommended. Heroes from the wild faction you're going to want to be using are Ares, Hista, Gila, Manton. Heroes with a neutral buff that you could also utilize would be like Fabian and Fang. So now we're going to move on to the fourth boss, which is Durla. Durla is a shadow hero, so that means forest heroes will have a faction advantage buff, while you're going to want to avoid using fortress DPS heroes. The unique aura is that she's going to have skeleton armor. What this does is a reduced haste of all the heroes that are near her. So this is a big no-no, as haste is the most important stat in this game, increasing movement speed, attack speed, cooldown reduction of skills, minus your ultimate. So you're going to want to avoid this. Ranged heroes are recommended to stay outside her haste debuff radius. Heroes from the forest faction you're going to want to be using are Fi, and yeah, just Fi. They really need to introduce a ranged DPS hero for this faction, preferably intelligence. Heroes with a neutral buff that you could also use would be like Durla, Issy. Issy actually shines really well here due to her energy drain. Gus, but like I've mentioned, he needs high investment to be worth using. And then finally, once you defeat those, you're going to do the 5th boss, which is Fafnir. So he's going to be factionless, meaning anything goes. No unique aura here, so just put your best heroes together for this boss. Now we're going to move over into the second tip, which is utilizing mercenaries. Depending how competitive your guild is, it's a good idea, if possible, whether on Discord or however your guild communicates, to get a list of your top members' heroes. It's a good idea to focus on star map. If you have members who have heroes with completed gold tiers, this is a huge advantage. Always, and I mean always, you're going to want to use 4 of your own heroes, plus hire 1 merc each fight. Take advantage of this feature, as this is going to add 3 extra heroes you can plan out to use and save your own. Remember, you can't use the same hero twice. So let's say right here, I want to use my Sura for attack number 1. I can't use her again on 2 or 3. However, there is a workaround for this. It's kind of like a little side tip, but it's really meant for supports since they're not meant to do damage. So you can see here I have this Harry. I can use him and be done with him. Then on my second attack, I can use my 1-star copy. That's why when I did my gold soul dice video, I mentioned I was going to keep either 1 hero copies or 1-star copies for this specific purpose, the Puppet Wars. Even if you have only 1 copy, Harry, Cinia, or Amelia are still super valuable and will be a huge damage help for your attacks. So you're going to want to find out your best heroes to put up as mercenaries. Top mercenaries to aim for DPS, you got Sir, great damage, great support with attack buffs and heals, so it's kind of like a win-win here. It's DPS and support. And then of course Hista, one of the top boss DPSers in this game. Fang, he's also a solid boss DPSer. And then Phi, if yours is, or if the Merc to hires is in the gold tier star map, it's going to be really beneficial. Otherwise, he's just not so impressive. And then Fabian, I'm not sure how many people will have him as a Merc, but if you held off on using him as a trial hero till this very moment, with tested numbers, he has moved into one of the top boss DPSers in the game. However, his survivability is a little iffy. And then Wyndon, he has very high damage, and amazing support buffs for other intel heroes, as well as your hero with the highest attack. Ares, many are going to have him ascended nicely, probably a lot of star map investment, but just don't flood your merc list with Ares. I've seen this before, so try to spread out your hero merc pool. And then there's definitely many more options, but I just wanted to name off a few. And then support. Now, typically, if you're using the mercs, I would always favor getting a highly invested DPSer, just because if your team is average, adding a maxed out Harry is only going to make them like maybe above average. However, if you have your own supports and hire a maxed out DPSer like some of the ones I mentioned, it's going to net you better results. At least that's what I've found. However, that's just best case scenario, and depending on your guild and the hero pool options that are available, it may not always be the case. So you're going to want to go with Harry, best support in the game. He will be the most valuable to have, especially with the gold tier with that enhanced therapy active skill, along with his ultimate for haste and of course the attack buff. And then you're going to want to use Cinia. She's an energy battery and helps with survivability. And then Amelia, she's a very good haste buffer, but I find survivability with her is much lower than the other 2. And then Wyndon and Sir could also be classified here as support. So that's a win-win, like I said before. And then moving down to the third tip, you're going to want to plan out your 3 attacks ahead of time. You're only going to get 3 attacks, so you want to make each one count, doing the most possible damage you can to help the guild progress. How I approach this is I want to figure out what bosses I'm going to be hitting that day. It's all based off the faction advantage buffs to maximize damage potential. What I mean by this is Naomi has high magical resistance, so you're going to want to utilize melee DPS. But if you plan to also hit Oshishi, which also needs melee DPS, you don't want to waste your strong wild DPS heroes on Naomi, as that's a neutral buff. Use them on Oshishi for the damage bonus. So I'm going to show you an example of my 3 attacks. So I'm going to start off with Bill. Shadow has an advantage, plus its recommended intelligence DPS. I would go with something like maybe Wyndon, even though mine has no star map. He has the buffs, and you're also going to be utilizing other intel DPSers, so this works perfectly for his support buffs. So I'm going to be doing something like Wyndon, Cinia, and then I'm going to use my 1-star copy of Harry, as this isn't going to be a very strong hit for me, so I don't want to waste my 6-star one. And then I'm going to hire a strong DPS Merc for this boss, so like Gus if available. And then I'm going to use my Sir, as I have a pretty good investment in her, so it's going to balance out the team with damage. Now after this hit, I know I don't have any more Cinia copies left, but I do have Amelia and then 2 more Harrys to use. So let's move on to Oshishi. Wild has advantage, plus recommended melee DPS. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go with something like using my Hista, as I know she's quite invested into. So I'm going to be using this as my best hit. and then Amelia. Then I'm going to use my strong Harry, Fang as he's going to be neutral, and then I'm going to hire a strong DPS merc like Sir to balance out my team with damage and a little bit of survivability. So then after that hit, I know I'm going to be lacking heroes at this point, but I still have that one copy of Harry, plus another 1-star copy of Amelia, so we're going to try and utilize both those. We're going to go down to my final attack. We're going to go for Durla. The reason for this is to utilize my Phi. So I would go with something like maybe Harry, and then Amelia, and then you're going to want to utilize those ranged heroes to stay out of her haste debuff that I mentioned before. So I'd probably go with something like Issy, Phi, and then I'm going to hire a strong DPS merc, which I'm probably going to go with another Sir to balance out the team. Or maybe instead I'm going to hire a strong Phi and then put in my Durla for the neutral buff. It's all going to depend on what warrants me better results before the battle ends. What I mean by this is you can always go to hit, see where the boss's HP started out with, and then with a couple seconds left, pause it, subtract to what it is at that very moment so you can see the difference to find out your potential damage hit. If it's not good enough, you're not liking it, you can simply retry and then play around with other possibilities. So this is just an example of how I would approach the 3 attacks per day, but it's definitely a good idea to go in with a game plan, which you can then tweak as you please. I feel it's better to spread out your potential damage hits to kind of average it out to 3 rather than just put your best team forward, all your best heroes, do your highest damage with that attack, and then you're going to be followed by 2 weaker attacks. Now we're going to move on to the 4th tip, which is don't waste your attacks. This is actually a pretty important one, and what I mean by this is say the boss has 300 million HP left, which you can see the HP right here. If you know you can do an attack that averages maybe 600 million damage, don't waste this on this and instead let a player who does lesser damage than you take the boss out. The damage doesn't carry over, so if you hit that 300 million HP boss, 300 million extra damage is going to be wasted. That's why it's a good idea just to be mindful of this, so when you go to attack, you don't make this mistake and it's going to hurt your guild's potential boss progression. I mentioned it already, but you can always pause and retry the fight. If you find you're going to for sure beat the boss with a lot of time left on the battle, or to gauge your actual damage on your attack. Before I mention this last tip, hopefully they can fix this Oshishi Puppet War boss bug, because at the time of the recording this is still an ongoing issue and it's very frustrating. This was never an issue with the last Puppet Wars, so I'm kind of interested to know why it's happening now and how they plan to compensate this. And then so for the 5th tip, it's going to help promote guild involvement, but right now with this bug it's kind of doing the opposite. Now I know not everyone likes to be competitive, so depending on the type of the guild you're in, do your best to work together, as this is by far the best event for rewards, specifically Dragon Shards, when it's actually working. I'm hoping this does remain a regular thing since the last one was in September, so it was pretty recently, and it allows for more guild interaction. Hopefully in the future they bring out other ways for the guild to work together. Best of luck to all the guilds out there, do your best, try for those rankings, and snatch up those rewards. As always, thanks for watching, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for future videos, and stay tuned for the next one.